permission, copyright, money, all of this. And as I mentioned, I've translated a lot of European things, and I'd like to mention some of the problems that we get into there. I can translate almost anything I want without asking anybody's permission. But if I want to publish that, that's another story. If I want to publish a translation of German, I have to go to the person who has the copyright on that, and I have to get his permission. Otherwise, there's a legal battle. Right now, I am editing an anthology of Finnish literature and translation. And in this, I want to quote a single line. It's one line of one German poem in translation. And for this, the entire book is being held up because I have to write a letter to Switzerland, and I have to write to the publisher and say, may we have your permission to quote one single line? And then he writes back and says, yes, how much money will you pay me? And I write back and say, we can pay you so much per that one line. And then, we wait, and they say, well, I don't know about that. But the important thing I'm mentioning here is that for European tradition, to quote a single line of a song, you have to have permission in writing, and very often you have to pay the person money. This is, of course, a commercial publication. But, these are important, and I think that for Tlingit, why not? If it applies to German, it should apply to Tlingit. There is no reason why somebody should feel a person should sing a song and that he can go and put it in the Alaska Magazine or the Anchorage Times. It's not done. He wouldn't do this with European literature. He should not do this with Tlingit literature. Secondly, that personally, when I translate, I have only translated at the request of people. That in all cases with the Finnish material, that the publishers said, would you translate this into English? And I said, fine, I would be very happy to. I mean, very often we'll work out a first level of translation, and I take it to the writer and I say, this is what I'm doing, do I have your permission to continue? So all of this is with the permission and very often at the request. Say, yes, I've read your work, I like it, I agree with it, we would be very happy to have you do it. And I think this is something that should apply to Tlingit also, that the Tlingit tradition bearers should have some choice over control of the publication, who does the translation, but especially where it goes, and do they or do they not want it published. And the last I'll mention is money. Who makes money on poetry? As far as I can see, the poets don't make any money, that it's the publishers. I am a beginner at a lot of this, but in my entire lifetime, I have finally, at Thanksgiving, gotten one thing out of my poetry, and that is I won a goose, and we ate it for Thanksgiving, and that's all that I've gotten out of writing in several years. So there is a problem about money, but we should be careful as to where the money goes, who is getting it, who is giving it out. Very often it's not the person that you see, but it's somebody further down the line. So finally, I'd just like to return to this idea about doing it right and say that for me, the most important consideration is what does this piece of composition, the speech, a song, a story, what does it mean to the people who composed it? What does it mean to the composer? What does it mean to the audience? What is the cultural context that this exists in? And that we should try to work not only to have the translation reflect this, but the way that we go about translating. And that's sort of, I'd like to leave you with that as a starter and turn it over now to Nora, who will be looking at it more from the point of view of a Tlingit. Only again, I would repeat that we're very happy to be in Sitka again. And it's a very wonderful country, and we missed it when we're up in Anchorage.
I just want to add a little more to Dick's presentation about the difficulties in translation. His point I don't have to go over anymore. It is difficult to translate, especially for me, the material that has been entrusted to me by the older generation. It's difficult to take on the responsibility of translating, because some of the material which has been entrusted to me are too difficult and sensitive to put into English words because you don't have the English equivalencies. I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want my people to think that I'm putting everything into their mouths by putting in my own translation. Because of this, it's been really slow for me. What I have done has been years on one speech, 2.5 years. Dick said that people are born with the knowledge. I am unfortunately born without the knowledge that my forerunners have, like you see sitting here. I have to go through a school to learn all about the culture, but I'm afraid I won't be able to learn all of it. My life isn't that long. And on top of this, I have to learn the English training. I have to go through the training of the English training that you need to translate materials. And this will take a little longer. I envy people who are trained from the time they are 18, 19 years old in English and get so proficient that they are just so confident they're going to do this zip. But I'm afraid a language, when you're working with two languages, are just so difficult that you can't do it in such a short time like I wanted to. Sai commented a little while ago that translation is impossible, and I tend to agree with him. He said that it would be difficult for a non-speaker to translate, and I agree with him here too. And at the same time, I feel that I haven't got enough of the traditional or traditions that were transmitted to people like A.P. Johnson, George Davis, and Sai. At the time my contemporaries were growing up, we were not allowed to speak our language. So we spoke English in the home and also outside the home. Because of this, I lost a lot of the cultural richness that the elders of our people have. So I feel like I've been robbed. But Andy also said a while ago he's seeking his identity through the knowledge of his culture. He is more robbed than I have. He has lost a lot more than I have. He doesn't have the language and he doesn't have the culture, so he feels he has been robbed. And he speaks for all of the young people that I've been speaking to. A lot of the younger generation want to learn the language. They feel that through the language they could learn about the culture. But this doesn't happen overnight. It's going to take a long time to bring back the language. But we have to try. But how are we going to try? We don't know. This hasn't been resolved. In addition to my frustration of the knowledge that the elders have, I also felt like an outsider a while ago when Jim McKinley was speaking in his own language. And yet at one time, we were one. He said we were one people, but we separated and learned a different language. So I felt like an outsider, yet he's an Indian. I should have understood him, but I didn't. So I could understand Andy's feeling about the hunger to know the language and to be able to understand the culture. George Davis commented also a while ago that the culture is like a ship sinking. Once the ship is underwater, it's impossible to bring it back up. He likened the Tlingit culture to this ship that's sinking. We have only grasped the tail end of it, and that's all we can salvage. Andrew Hope also said, they placated the water in Old Sitka to break once more when drought was upon them. They placate the water so that they will have a different or another break in the weather, so the water would come back, because the water was so sweet and was so important to the life of the people there. He likened the water to the drought of the water to the breakdown of the culture and the loss of the language. But yet he is placating the water to break once more, that our culture be like the water breaking again. But it isn't like this today. It is drying up the face of the mountain. There is no water. There's a lot we could talk about here about how important it is to us that we bring back our culture and we translate. But I think the most important and difficult is how we do it. What is going to be our ethics? Are we going to keep it in Alaska, in the village, with the people that own it? Or are we going to use it for wider consumption for other people who will probably misinterpret it again over and over? We have to resolve this problem, otherwise we don't translate at all. And Henry also had a thought about using for educational purposes. Educational purposes for universities, local schools, or Alaska, the world. This is another problem we have to resolve. I was talking to a friend of mine a while ago and asked him how he felt about it. And we both felt that we are protective about the culture, because this is practically all we have left of the past. And no one is about to let go of it until we have resolved the ethics of who is going to translate.
Чатагваса хуних зати. Тлет хак энахит хахтатани конжатэ наю. Хасти инаяк ханик аделития аджионак. Ялтаката адихсити каталаде жихтуанакля. Жан qa ayas itina khat chkuge ajutuzikwani yahayati. Yahayat kitsatlatsausku. Hastuşukwa, aku aga koshi tatxaya khatsiti. Tlishkeistako, wasa khatu wasako. Aku egu khasiku aist inu khanik khatso itina khatyati. Tlakaka khosti. Yakonach Tlingit Kustie Daduni Jaya Tled Kakosti Achshako Doati Achkaga Ajetel Daslach Sako
ye aya kunelchish khan yuqaila atke.
Thank you, Dick and Nora. The next presentation will be by Nathaniel Tarn. Nathaniel currently lives in New Hope, Pennsylvania. He's done a few translations. I think perhaps the best translation that he's done was of some of Pablo Neruda's work. And he's currently teaching at Rutgers University. And, well, he could tell you a little bit about himself. And I'll let him take over now. Nathaniel Tarn, translation as conversation, ?
I was extraordinarily grateful when Andrew Hope gave me the possibility of coming back to see Sitka, as it turns out, because when I was here last summer for several days, I did not see it. The summer weather can do that. I knew I was going to see a lot of friends again, but I was extremely worried because I really didn't know what use I could be to people here. And I've been thinking a great deal about Alaskan art since that visit. In fact, I've been thinking of it for about a quarter of a century because I was a student of the French anthropologist Lévi-Strauss, who spent a great deal of his efforts on the cultures of the Pacific Northwest. And I fell in love with the art very early, when I was about 20 or so, to the extent that in every single one of my books, whenever there was a possibility of illustration, I put in a picture. This is the third book. It's full of different pictures, but here is a picture of a pole. And that happened in each one of my books. It was a curious kind of presence that I wanted there. Well, I thought that I could perhaps contribute something by talking mainly as what I am, which is a poet. As Richard told you, poets don't make money in our culture, except for very few. So the way I make the money I need is to be a teacher. And that has influenced my thinking on these things a good deal, too. I want to start by showing you one or two examples of what I do, and then go on from there into perhaps a kind of philosophy of these things, which springs out of what I do. I want to play a little piece of a tape, which was made for me 25 years ago by a Native American tradition bearer and priest from the village of Santiago Atitlan de los Tzutujiles, which is a Maya village in Guatemala in Central America. I did everything that was necessary for those performances to be made. The only thing that is to say, I made all the payments and did the training and so on. The only difference was that I was recording it. He knew I was recording it. And he gave me the right to do what I wanted with it, right which, amongst other rights, is exemplified in this scarf. This is a scarf which cannot be bought. It can only be given. As a matter of fact, I've never played this tape at all to anyone in 25 years. And I won't say that I'm playing it for educational purposes today, but I'm playing it just to tell what happens and why this material entered into me. I won't play too long because nobody knows the language, so I won't burden you with it, but then I'll read a little from the translation of it, and then we'll go on from there.
Takata siempre más atenanta siempre chocata siempre tanta shneko que shneka choku chotaka. Con hegache Dios con hegache rahli con hegache cuen que va a Dios y angla Dios siempre shiroka shire kan sayo sampe siempre shiroka shire sampa siempre shiroka shire kan Dios. Que va a hora kan Cristo don Cristo va que va a hora kan sakra va sakra me que va a hora kan kalta Dios sakra va sakra ang don koban Allah koban chena bal qihno bal sakir khawa ke kan. Kan mako ke karimana resa ka shara ka sana chepista con heche Dios que mako te fete el khawar ben qil ay Dios ang Dios ra khawar khayr qil atgulat natala atul ben ma bal sakha zaman rahwal no bal trina qawakan ay ka los aqita bal shi atgulat natala ra.
These are, of course, prayers. The villages down there have been Catholic for 400 to 500 years. But underneath the Catholicism, a great deal of the original religion of the Maya has survived. In that sense, Catholicism was perhaps easier on the old traditions than Protestantism, for one very simple reason, which is that the old gods could hide behind the Catholic saints, whereas in Protestantism they did not have that opportunity to hide. That's not said as a value judgment. I think it's an accepted idea, what has happened in religions south of the United States, as opposed to what has happened in religions in the United States and north. But I think that these prayers are magnificent poetry, in the same way as Richard tells me that the speeches of the people who live here in Sitka and all about are magnificent poetry. So this is a fragment from the prayers made on behalf of Nathaniel Tarn by the Tsituhil Maya priest Nicolas Chivilio of Tsiquinaha, the House of Birds, in Guatemala in 1953 and later again in 1969. In the name of the Creator God and angel, O God, I meet you prostrated, I meet you seated, may you be remembered, God, creator of day and light, angel and Lord San Simon, remembered before creation in the fragrance of fruit your throne is adorned with, in your books, in your accounts, before the world, before the Savior. Father God, elder among elders, in the fragrance of fruit, praised in 1,000 prayers, son of the incense and the candle, because you existed through the centuries of existence that the world has existed, because even below the clouds your hands and feet exist, Lord San Simon, first angel, you who are seated as one of the Saint Simons of glory, remembered in your yellow cape, in your white cape, in your yellow coat, in your white coat, in your yellow gaiters, in your white gaiters, in your yellow overcoat, in your white overcoat. Now I am consulting you with the help of a bunch of wax candles, with the help of a bunch of deluxe candles. Now I remind you of one of your sons, a descendant of yours, O God, who has remembered your hands and your feet, O great master and personage. Perhaps you are going about the world, going up and down the face of the world, using the crossroads. Who knows, in the mission of your daily round, like a sentinel or a sergeant or a policeman, and in your long march you take with you 2 or 3 great thoughts, and perhaps you meet with the sinners of the world and the face of the earth. O Lord and Master, we aren't spying, we aren't judging your acts. Do not drown us, do not suffocate us. It is not my thing that I called your spirit, that I called your sanctity. It's the person here, it's his thing, your son who comes to beg with wax and candle grease, with the savor of these things that your son has brought here smoothly, and with the sound of violin and guitar. Perhaps you will have to go, perhaps you will have to promenade through the holy night, the holy darkness, you great doctor and personage of the holy world. And who will protect me then, O God, O world, who have come crossing the world from a far-off place, feels very poor in your hands, poor and orphaned, to come to you, Father, Mother, looking for your hands, looking for your feet, looking for your lips that have been so highly recommended to me. Thanks to you, Lord, I have a great desire to see you, and I'm very happy to talk to my Father today. I feel happy and I'm much admired in the face of the world because it is the Lord angel who is leading me. And it goes on like that for several hours. The experience of working with that master was something which has remained with me for my whole life and has entered into the poems and songs which I have written myself. I thought that I might read you some of that today to show you how one poetry enters into another poetry. And that is what I mean by translation and what I mean by conversation. But I think since it may be better to keep that for a special meeting of people who are especially interested in poetry. So I will, as opposed to all the other arts, so I will just go on now and talk about what that kind of thing has meant to me through my life, and what sort of result it brings about. The use of this material from Tsutohil Maya in a poem which is about my whole world, including the Maya. Because a global education and an absence of roots have given me no alternative to taking the whole world as my mother. I do not have one particular place, and that makes this kind of life very different from some other kinds of life. But it has led me to believe that this whole world is open to all. The books are there, the knowledge and the resources. They are waiting. Language, of course, is a great barrier. This is why I believe in translation. Translation in one of our old languages, Latin, is turning something from one language to another. And when I say that, I think, when I ask the question, could translation be conversation? I am using conversation in the following way. It means, of course, talking together. Con is from the Latin word with. Versation is from the Latin word vertere, versus, which means a turn of the plow when you're plowing a field, or a furrow in a field, or a line, and from there a row, and then a line of writing. So translation plus conversation equals to make poetry all together. I believe that art is global. Visual art, of course, needs no language, so it has been the subject of innumerable Alaskan conferences and reports. In that sense, it is wonderful that Andrew Hope has seen fit with his colleagues to make this conference deal with poetry also. But I think we have to separate art and economics from what I've seen in all these reports of all these conferences. Economics has to do with talk about arts and crafts, with money, with markets, with producing for others who buy. Economics is buying, purchasing, and often stealing and ripping off. It is a legitimate field, and it is very important for Alaskan Native industry. But it is not the field of art, as some here, I think of Ron Sunungatuk's piece in Cross-Cultural Arts in Alaska, have clearly seen. From that point of view, an artist and his or her community can only be concerned with the creation or realization and operationality of their own aesthetics. By the word aesthetics here, I mean a philosophy of beauty arrived at in any given human group by a self-knowledge of the processes of creation and consumption of art. I think that art is giving and accepting, not buying and selling. This is primary. Any sale of art is secondary. Sale of craft, of course, is usually primary. But of course, it may be too easy for me to talk that way. A non-native comes and says, art is universal, give us yours, give yours to the world. The native may feel that he has, quote, given, unquote, too much already. The world museums are full of native art, much of which was not given but stolen. Are there native museums full of world art? Where are the great museums of world art in Alaska? There are none. How many world artists are coming to Alaska to give? Few or none. It is military and oil men and tourists who come here to buy and sell. Has native ownership of art, what Mr. Peck in his recent book published in Juneau, The Tideswater Peoples, has bluntly called the law of copyright, has that copyright been respected? No, not even by anthropologists or artists or writers. They take these things and put them in their museums and put them in their books. So perhaps even we non-native professors and artists are as guilty as the rest, and that's why I was asking myself whether it's possible to say anything that's useful here. On the other hand, it may also be that art is the one place where such guilt should not go on existing. I'd like to come back on that if there's any discussion of this talk afterwards. It is a terrible problem and has been going on for 500 years or more. When Europe, quote, discovered, unquote, America, it made nature and natural people exploitable. It defined the West by a colonizable non-West, launched inauthentic views of universal freedom, liberalism, and humanism, which benefited the West and not the non-West. It raised capitalism to a supreme status of totalitarian corporate exploitation, the latest tidal wave of which is now endangering all the beauties and peoples of this, quote, last frontier, unquote. And the, quote, discovery, unquote, of Africa, Asia, Australia was the same. Yet, as Richard has pointed out, we must also remember that this giant has squeezed out the poets and artists in its own midst, as well as the native, which is probably why our artists and poets have been desperately seeking for the last 200 years, and one can document the history of that, seeking the native, the archaic, the original inside themselves, which is still there from their thousands of years of history. Exploitable labor has corrupted Western man into commodities to be bought and sold, slaves of TV and advertising, and the blank idiocy of consumerism. Material poverty is one thing, and we are, of course, clear, and it must be absolutely clear, that most non-natives are better off than most natives. But cultural poverty is becoming universal now. As we grind towards monoculture, towards one brand name, human. I think we are all, native and non-native, involved in change. And as Andy Hope has pointed out, there's no room there for romanticism. So it seems to me, and I put this forward with many, many question marks, it seems to me there must be, let's say, 3 steps towards what I'm calling conversation on the native side. It being for the natives to tell non-natives what steps to take on their own side. Because unless we say what we think and you say what you think, I don't see how any talk can ever happen. The first step is that native art and native aesthetics must be owned and possessed and defined and created by natives alone. And at this moment, of course, I should immediately get off the platform because that's what it's all about. But since I'm here, I'll finish. It is very late, but perhaps not too late for native economic power as it is now to preserve what is still in hand, to buy back if necessary, and however painfully, what can still be bought back, and to attend to the problem of creation of new art in relation both to its own traditions and to the outside world. I have some further ideas in detail on that if I can speak again at some point. But I do not see how it can ever be done without complete native ownership of those things which can still be owned and reclaimed. After this first step, the second step is to take from the rest of the world whatever is needed. The books are there, education is there, travel is there, and I know that the regional corporations here are making initial moves in that direction, sending people out, sending native students out to take what they need. As far as art is concerned, the whole question of whether or not a native art, 1, could, and 2, should enter universal art is raised by this second step. In discussion, it would be important to raise these questions perhaps under some such heading as metropolitan versus regional art, or something of that sort. There is a definite question, as the previous speakers pointed out, a question of choice which cannot be made by anybody else than the owners. whether they are to keep that for themselves or to send it out into the world. I think that it should be sent out into the world, but it is not my business to decide that. I can only say and ask the question. The third step is one that I can only hope and pray for. It is that once native art has done all this, then it goes out to teach. It knows it can teach what technological civilization is doing to destroy the earth. It knows biology and ecology as well or better than non-natives do. The book about Etok, Edwardson, made this clear to me recently. It can question the disappearance of diversity, question the monolithic growth of consumerist progress, so-called. It can say that in the thousands of years mankind has been around, it has been around longest, that its poems and art objects have been around longest, that a major part of human time has been devoted to subsistence living, and that we non-natives have forgotten too much for anyone's good, including our own. And then if native culture does that, it might meet non-native men and women who believe that we are all native or that none of us are native, which is perhaps the same thing. That there are universal criteria for these things, that respect for all of life, the preparation of one's own mind to be a singer for all of life, for the Mother Earth, for the encounter of self and other in all the wildernesses, inner and outer, is the key to true progress, and that in the vast perspective of human time, what is before us rather than behind us, we are all children with everything to learn. And then we shall have conversation, perhaps. And then translation will end as a duty and become a labor of love, and then poetry will begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathaniel. Now we'll call on some individuals to respond, if they wish, to the formal presentations. And first we have Peck Sr. listed, if you wish to.
Knowledge plus translation equals communication. That is the subject we are discussing this afternoon. Atuska adaqnaqta qad kawanik aya yuqatan qixsiti aya adayuta tshi atkh ya afternoon ya yaki tlet qaqina yuqatan gaya shalhayu qatan qixsti I sure how to say it. Let car renach so hot so tell I so yak to acht. Has such a yes to Nathaniel te yak and use go she at day. Was a she use a car cartel get then as recha acht. Aracho han carlin get has a tea. Da sa da yakshus a gay I saw da huchat at Tarn. Ajaya Dauenhauer hochsen get khasati ya ajaya jego ken kekawa ya haji etich khanakh toa ku keden ya natusane da sa itna khati. English language is not my mother tongue. English language is foreign to me, and therefore translation is important. That a Caucasian translate himself to me in Tlingit. Translation works both ways, and it can help both ways. The law says that ignorance is no excuse, but yet there are many of our people in this country that do not understand law, but yet they have to pay the penalty. You see, translation and interpretation works both ways. Therefore, if I'm ignorant of a law and if I break the law, I am not at fault according to our law, the Tlingit law. Now, therefore, if it is not translated to me and it is not interpreted to me, and if I break that law, we feel that we are not at fault, but yet you Caucasians say, that ignorance is not an excuse. Therefore, English is not my mother tongue. So therefore, I am not ashamed to speak broken English in my efforts to try to communicate with you. Translation has been a barrier to many writers, history writers, Bancroft, Drucker, Krauss, De Laguna. Someone had to translate to her, to him, or whoever did the research in the culture of our native people. Qanaqtaqat kawanik ya atxiti. Qanaqtaqat kawanik. Adut sat qanaqtaq kawanik da sa akhin. Tet ate khasiku ya. Such ayach you kaudaniki qanaqtaq kaudaniki khana qayat saxta qushusakinach. Atjawatsi yake yut khatitan. As the Yucatan getucht Yuchis Achwankaninks. Konachta kat kawanik kadat and datane achat jikoach yachat natij. So adut sakonachta kawanik Yuchatank. Tesate keten wasati konachta kachtawanikia. Translation and interpreting the Tlingit language is impossible. And I repeat again, it is impossible. Translation of the Tlingit language can be only at everyday simple conversations such as cat, douche, dog, Kate, ka, man, shawat, woman, yan hakut, I'm walking, gudesayane gut, where are you going? Wasiyatuati, how do you feel? Wasasiyati, how are you all feeling today? How are you all today? Plurality there exists. Translation of these simple little languages, simple vocabularies in the Tlingit language is possible, but let's go deeper. Let us go deeper. Why I say that translating and interpreting the Tlingit language today is impossible. At shuwlach. At shuwliach. At shuwliach. At shuwlach. What is that? What is it? I can't interpret it. It is a form of speech that is used when there is no hope for life. Can anyone interpret this particular sentence or this word? I can't. It's impossible. All right, let's go a little further. Wutakhena. Wutakhena. What is it? What is this word? What does it mean? Will you? Okay, George. Thank you, George. Wutakhena. Right, right. I bring you this word. What does it mean? What does it mean, George? Tlingit khenach nachtach kanik ta say to sago.
Take away.
Go right ahead. Go right ahead.
chance hot Tiaki of a tanki ye by a pain of a stay a agency demonic cash are dead ya the unicorn eat to a tanki huge argo Tiaki are you of a tanki on Gunjo a yarn day of a tongue not one who are young staff Kapaka Nidush at the party is Hata Hisia. At a Pasat party of Kane for them, take a to Chowki on a side, Kitank of the Kane. I have quite a year can the town. I got higher,
Ye Hayate, Yaka, Kunachish, Utakaina. These are words that are very important in our formal life. Deep thinking, deep words, deep meaning that has been carried on from time immemorial, from generation to generation to generation, right to now, to this day. Even those that are sitting down here understands and they know what I am talking about. Even if I try to translate it, I can make an effort to try to translate these things, but it will not be fully colored. The feeling will not be there, or you will not understand just what I am talking about. You see? These things are very important. It is a sound that is made the very last sound when there is no hope for life. What does that mean to you? I know what it means, and they know, those that speak it understand. They feel it in their chests, their hearts. And it brings tears to their eyes when they hear it, because that sound is the last sound given and uttered, because there is no hope for life. They don't use it as daily vocabulary. They keep that word because it is valuable until the time comes when their life is coming to an end by drowning or natural disease. The last sound given at Shuurlach. Now, awat kadushi senachji aiti. Katuk sa kahini wat dayanaiha. Awat kadushi senachji aiti. Achlish kwasi katangi. Oh, that's my grandpa. Formal words that gives a deep feeling. It stirs my emotion up to hear these words because there is a deep meaning in it. I'll try and translate it to you and interpret it as much as I can possibly can. But it will seem no sense at all. The word says, take this man to a certain river that untangles the feeling of emotions, the river that untangles the feelings of emotion. And thereupon at the mouth of this river is a standing statue of some sort, of some type. We don't know what it is. They call it a wat kadushi. There put his arms around it. Don't make sense. I try to interpret it to you, but I did not bring to you the real meaning of it. Yes. Awat kadushli senach jiaiti. Ashkutanigwa. Ashkutanigwa. What does that mean? I don't. George? Ashkutanigwa. I believe that this is tied in to the last sound, according to his explanation, which is a very long story. I would not go into it now. But all this is the payment for a crime committed, a life for a life, tooth for a tooth. And that is what this thing means. You see, I'm trying to bring to you as much as possible, as I possibly can, translation and interpretation of these things in regards to our language, our culture, or our tradition are important. So, wakanashig sayautuat. Wakanashig sayautuat. Adach katu agus to cheat you to Adach yakuske Adach yisiku yikusti Yayakiete Tahaya kuch kanahota ati Ayachatash Gachtaus Wakanashig sayautuat. Adach hadash hankayan kahayat kichis yet to at. Adayo Tachtasaat. Gawayakot Kena Hich Hadachtan the Tarn Yate. Cheslaya Wanik Sayat Adult Sutsuyakotlak Sayakos Kanahata Adis Guksa. Aya Etixity Adayo Tachsaat Gayaki. So, how far have we gone? How far have we gone in undertaking the native and his culture, in bringing it to the civilized and the educated Western world? How far? The second time we have gotten together here to bring the knowledge of these men that are sitting here that gets up and respond, I can call on each one of them to get up and explain just what the word means. What is a culture? What is the tradition? What is the song and its words? Someone mentioned here, the previous speaker, that a song can be sung. A song that is sung by a Tlingit ethnic member of this nation sings it because he feels it. He sings it because he understands it and because it's his song. His clan, the song belongs to his clan because his uncle composed the song at a certain time because of certain circumstances that's before him. These are the things that goes along with the culture and tradition. How far have we gone since the second conference? Time is important with me because I'm up in this age now, where time is very important for when we do get together to talk about what we know, exchange our ideas, our understanding, and our knowledge. How far have we gone? We have started in the right direction. Why Tlingit culture today? In closing, let me go in to Tlingit culture. Why Tlingit culture today? And I believe that's essential and important that we go into this part of our thinking this afternoon. Wanachsaya yagkush kanachatiat. Dasahat hundatani tukeyate. Chuchakotaka kosti ayayate. Adakha itkena wat a. Hastuyachatushkin. Hadachankayan hayatki. Achaya hadanatani tukeyate yidat. Yayaki kutsati yis kacho yadas kikawa susi yachate. Tetha kosti ayatlet kakosti tukes yate. Choaya adas yakautlekade yachate. Akas kushi. Hastukakas kosti. Hastukakas hastu inchsatiche. Shaut sati astu atsati.